You're at 93.5, 1590 WAKR. Love this time of week. On a Friday, we go to film school with film study professor Joe Fortunato. And today he's going to go back to one of the big comedy hits of the 1980s, and I'll kind of let Mr. Fortunato take it from there. Good morning, Joe, and thanks for joining us again this morning.
Good morning, Ray. Good morning, everybody. And we're kind of celebrating back to school today, as a lot of local students went back to school this week with a school favorite, if you will, one of the best school. In fact, it was ranked number 10 on the Entertainment Weekly's 50 Best High School Movies. That is Ferris Bueller's Day Off from 1986. June 11th, 1986 was its release date. It was written and directed by the late, great John Hughes. Matthew Broderick, of course, stars as Ferris Bueller, also stars Alan Ruck and Mia Sara as his pals that go on a playing hooky day adventure. I already mentioned it's one of the highly rated high school movies. In 2014, it was added to the National Film Registry by the United States Library of Congress of being a film of significance. And it's just a fan favorite. There was actually an idea of a sequel that had gone around for years where Ferris would be in college or on a job somewhere. But the idea was dropped because Matthew Broderick felt that the film didn't really need a sequel, that it was about a specific time and place that we'd all like to revisit, and it really didn't need updating. And I certainly respect that. Not every movie needs a sequel, although that's business. The first edit of the film was actually 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is crazy for a comedy. Obviously, that was edited down to a manageable sequence or a manageable running time. The famous parade sequence was actually shot where they do the twist and shout scene, people will remember from the film, was actually filmed during the Van Steuben Day Parade, which honestly I've never heard of. But that's an annual event in the Chicagoland area and other places around the country, but it's a big deal in Chicago. During that parade, several of the people seen dancing on screen, including a construction worker and a window washer. They had nothing to do with the film. They were simply dancing to the music that was being played, and John Hughes found that so humorous that he told the camera operators just to record it. So people were literally dancing in the streets regarding this film.
Well, the one thing when you look at, and you mentioned Chicago, that stands out to me, Joe, is really Mr. Hughes really showcased the city of Chicago all around in this film, going from, you mentioned the parade to Wrigley Field to the Sears Tower, really showcasing the city.
Yeah, and he does that in all of his films because that's the area he's from. In fact, the restaurant where Ferris and his companions go to eat is the same one that Jake and Elwood terrorized in the Blues Brothers, if you remember that scene, which is very funny. Shermer High School is the name of the high school in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's also the same named high school in Weird Science, 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club. So you might say this is a whole John Hughes universe, that they all live in the same kind of universe. A couple of other, fun stories from the film. Everybody remembers probably the most famous line in the movie is when Ben Stein, playing the economics teacher, says Bueller. He actually had a degree in economics, so John Hughes told him just present an actual economics lecture in the scene. So the scene where he's giving that lecture is not scripted. So the only thing that was actually scripted was that roll call. Another sort of kind of semi-famous line from the film comes from the principal secretary, played by Edie McClurg, who's also in a lot of John Hughes film, where she says he's a righteous dude in a kind of crazy Chicago accent. That was not in the original script. It was just ad-libbed in her best Chicago accent as well. Some of the casting choices, John Hughes said that he always had Matthew Broderick in mind when he wrote the screenplay. But there were a number of other people considered. Probably you'd think the usual suspects of that era: Rob Lowe, John Cusack, Jim Carrey, Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise, Robert Downey Jr., Michael J. Fox. So a lot of the big names from that era, or the up-and-coming names, maybe is even a better way to put it. John Candy. Now, this is kind of crazy to me. John Candy auditioned for the role of Cameron, Ferris's buddy, but the producers turned him down, saying he was too old for the part, which I think is pretty obvious. I'm sort of surprised his agent even sent him out on that one. Paul Gleason, who had the role of the assistant principal in The Breakfast Club, was actually considered for the role of the principal here in this film. So, again, kind of part of that whole John Hughes universe.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And you know what? The scene with the car, too. I mean, and I know you touched on it, but taking the car out and those guys having a joyride, I mean, that was terrific, too. Not only showcasing Chicago, as you mentioned, but the vehicle going all around the city and the stress.
Well, that was actually not even a real Ferrari. They had mocked it up to look like one, which is kind of crazy. They didn't want to destroy a real Ferrari, and it was expensive.
Mm.
Now, one other thing I'll mention about the music, John Hughes personally selected the songs for the film, and he wanted them to be somewhat obscure to the typical movie-going audience. For example, the song heard at while the Ferrari is revealed for the first time, and in the end is now sort of semi-famous. "Oh Yeah" by the Swiss band Yellow, which no one had really ever heard of before the movie, but its popularity at the end of the credits, and it's kind of used, since then, almost as a parody in other movies, with humorous results as well.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Film School today with film study professor Joe Fortunato. As always, great visits with Joe. Maybe you go back and watch that again this weekend. Certainly we'll get some laughs. Joe, thanks for the time again, my friend. We'll do it again next Friday.